Well, welcome to a very impromptu Kane's Corner podcast. I'm Adam Gold. Thanks for joining me. I'm not even home. I leave, things happen, and there might very well be more things happening before I get back to town. So I thought we would just kind of powwow for a couple of minutes and kind of go through some news and notes that have gone on really since I've left. We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. Even if I'm not in North Carolina, I'm in Denver, Colorado. If it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. And by the way, they do a killing out here in the Westminster area. There's a lot of places with some that are in disrepair, if you will, that they could use the Aluminum Company of North Carolina, help them out. On Hamlin Road in Durham, aluminumcompany.com. All right. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to be here very long at all. I know I say that. Sometimes I go on for 30 minutes. I don't think that's going to happen today. We're going to talk about Yevgeny Kuznetsov and his departure, Jack Drury and his contract, Seth Jarvis and where we are with that. Some encouraging signs, I think. We'll talk about Jesper Fast and what may or may not be happening there. Martin Necas, the lines that some of you have thrown out there that we'll talk about, and just some intriguing thoughts about the roster, not this year, but next year. So I know this is going to be a different year for a lot of us. We're used to being at the top of the division, and hey, we might. I mean, we might. I don't anticipate it. I don't think we are as good as the Devils or the Rangers right now, but I also don't think we're at the bottom. I think this is a playoff team. I think it'll be a different kind of year. So anyway, let's get to a couple of things, shall we? And we'll start with Yevgeny Kuznetsov, who, as I said on Monday, my intel the previous week had been that it was basically a done deal, and I'd been prodding some at the team for some news, some confirmation on it, and I was getting more pushback from them than anything. And I think, and this is probably, I'll tell you why in a second, but ultimately it is going to happen because Kuznetsov's going to go back to the KHL, and he's going to sign a long-term contract there, as the team and Kuznetsov had mutually agreed to terminate the contract. And somebody asked me on Twitter, at A Gold Fan, feel free to do that. Was it substance abuse or anything like that? As far as I know, I mean, there's been no inkling of that. I don't think it had anything to do with that. And I hope that Kuznetsov is clear of that for the rest of his life. But this is the way I look at it, is that last year, in his time here, small sample size, but his impact after the first couple of games was spotty. Certainly in the regular season, it was spotty, is probably doing a lot of work there. In the playoffs, he had some big moments and he scored some big goals. But much like a team in baseball, if you're not a great team, maybe having a great closer is not great. It's unnecessary. Like, on this roster, Kuznetsov was going to have to play as a number 2 center. There's just no other spot for him on the lineup. He's got to play with highly skilled offensive players, and Carolina's only going to have maybe 2 lines full of them. So he was never going to be a 4th-line center here, and because he just wasn't consistently effective, I think the Hurricanes decided that that's $3.9 million in cap space we need to get, especially if we just want to sign Necas, Jarvis, and Drury. Talk about Jack in a second. So we could say they mutually agreed to part ways, terminate the deal. But I really feel like the team basically said, look, there's no role for you here. And you don't want to be on a 4th line. It's just going to frustrate you. We're not finding anybody around the league that's interested in trading for you. So KHL. So that's the way I think it happened, but it doesn't really matter how it happened. It's happened. And the Hurricanes will get $3.9 million in cap space back. The reason why the team pushed back on my queries was because apparently the way this works out, and maybe it's because there's a third team involved, Washington, there were a lot of complicated pieces to get in place to make sure that there weren't cap hits here, and I guess in DC too, because they're free of the cap charge as well. So unfortunately, the Kuznetsov era is over after just a few months. I liked him. I wish it would have worked out, but it didn't work out. Jack Drury signed his contract, 2 years, $3.45 million. It's a little bit more in terms of cash this year than next year, but the end result is $1.725 million cap hit, which frankly is a little lower than I thought it would be. I thought that cap hit would be a little bit higher. I had it budgeted for like two. So whatever. I think Jack was a pretty good player and is a pretty good player and has a really good future. And I think ultimately he's going to be here a very, very long time. I think we have to keep in mind what Jack Drury is, because if we start overrating our own players, we lose sense of what's right. I think Jack is a 3-4 center. I think he can play higher in the lineup, but I don't think he's really suited to play as a 2 center on a championship caliber team. I said this going into the playoffs last year, well before the playoffs, that to me, that was the one thing that I thought would hold Carolina back. I hope that Kuznetsov would have solved that, but it didn't. And ultimately, what happened later in the playoffs is that Jack Drury became the 2C. So, and that's not the way the Hurricanes are going to be a Stanley Cup contending team. Jack Drury is a 3rd or 4th center, and he can be a good one because he's reliable in all 3 zones. He can get some power play time. He's good in the faceoff circle. As he gets bigger and or at least stronger, he'll be a better player. I think his skating is good. I think he's got a little bit of offensive upside, but he's not going to be a 45, 50 point a year guy. So let's keep all of that in mind. Let's move on to Seth Jarvis. This might be the stuff that you like or don't, I don't know, are more interested in than anything else we're going to talk about, because the other stuff is factual and already happened. My understanding is that the two sides are actively engaged in contract talks, and both sides want the same thing. They both want an 8-year deal. Where we are now at a sticking point is what that number will ultimately be at. My understanding right now is that the number is north of 8, which I'm not that surprised that it's north of 8. I'm surprised that the team is also north of 8, because I thought the team was going to try to keep it around Andrei Svechnikov level at 7.75. So polite golf clap to the Hurricanes for recognizing that Seth Jarvis and his long-term potential is, I mean, every situation fearless. My fear is that because he's 5'10", 185 or 190 pounds, if that, that, playing the way he plays could be problematic. Doesn't have to be. I mean, Brad Marchand is smaller than Seth Jarvis. I'm not comparing the players, but 5'10" is not. He's not a leprechaun. So, but that's where we are. My sense is that will get done. How long both sides want to hold out to get the other side to come the last, yard, I don't know. But right now, I think the team has moved more than the agent. How about that? But I think that'll get done. So if we just kind of budgeted 8 times 8.5, maybe even a shade higher, 8 times 8.75. I don't know. I think that we're probably in the ballpark, and that'll get done in a hurry. All right. Jesper Fast. So My understanding is that we're a few weeks away from a definitive uh, report, I guess, on Fost. Remember, he got hurt, neck injury, missed the entire playoffs. They declared him out for the playoffs from the very beginning. He was even at the end of the season exit meetings, he was wearing a neck brace. And everything that I had heard during the postseason, the offseason, has been pessimistic about Jesper Fost's return. There was some hope that, yeah, he's not going to be ready for the starting training camp, but he might be back during the course of the season. And I don't know if optimism or pessimism is even fair to use here, but I think there's a pretty big range of what could happen. He could be back in the middle of the year. He could miss the entire season, which would be the last year of his contract with Carolina. Or the possibility is we could be looking at a retirement for Jesper Fast. And first of all, none of those are good. He's a really good player. Epitomizes what Carolina does, in terms of what their on-ice product is. Incredibly hard worker, super dude, great teammate, all of that. So, I want him to have the best possible life he can have. But there is every chance that we have seen the last of Jesper Fast. I hope we haven't. But again, we're still a few weeks away from hearing something about it, which of course would provide Carolina with an additional $2.4 million of cap space that they can't really do anything with unless they just want to go out and, spitballing here, trade some futures for Nick Ehlers. I don't think they'll do that. But anyway, so again, more cap space possibly, but I don't think it would be about that at all. Remember, Fost only has one more year left in a contract, and then he's done. After this year, his $2.4 million comes off the books anyway. Martin Necas. No movement really on this. I don't have a date for arbitration. I don't know that has been set. I don't think it'll go to arbitration. I think the team and the player will settle. Whether it's 1 year or 2 years doesn't really matter. I really don't think it matters. I think the team might be fine with 1 year and just going through all this again. It's also possible that the team signs him to a 1-year deal. If the season doesn't go well, move him at the deadline. I mean, he's a super talented player. I think he'll do well with the responsibility. And we talked about this extensively right here on this podcast about what Necas could do in terms of being asked to do a lot more for this team. So that's where we are with, I guess, the existing players. Let me just talk very quickly about the forward lines that people have put out there. One, if you're putting forth a forward line that has a rookie on the top line, go check yourself. It ain't going to happen. We're not playing a rookie. There is no rookie that's ready for 17 to 20 minutes a night playing with Aho and Jarvis. The rookies that would play there would also likely get power play time. That ain't going to happen. But a third line centered by, Jack Drury would certainly be a place where you could see a rookie play. So whether it's Bradley Nadeau or Felix Unger-Sora, whoever, if you were looking at a rookie to make the team and be on one of the, 3 scoring lines, if you will, that Carolina might have, even though probably only 2, then it would be that one. But you're not going to see him play up top. My guess is that barring something weird, Aho and Jarvis could be joined by Svechnikov. But then again, you need to know that you need to have a scoring line, a second scoring line. I could see Andre playing on a second scoring line. I could see Andre playing with Stahl and Martinook. I could see Jarvis playing with Stahl and Martinook. And Aho, Svechnikov, and somebody on the right side. Jack Roslovic, just kidding. But I will tell you this about Roslovic. He can skate. And maybe, the lines are not going to be – it's pointless to actually even try to come up with forward lines. Pointless to try and come up with forward lines for this group right now anyway. So let's stop doing that. All right, final thing, and this is food for thought for not this season, but next season. Remember this. I do believe that the Hurricanes are a playoff team. The culture, the way they play is repeatable for 82 games. So barring injury to Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Natchez, because I think he'll be here, I think they're going to score enough and rely on defense, which I think is going to be okay. Not as good as last year. You're never as good when Brady Shea and Brett Pesce aren't around, but I think they'll be okay. But I think they're a playoff team. There's no reason to think that they're not. And just for sake of argument, I've got him right now after the Drury signing with, if you wanted to pay both, I'm not saying they will. If you want to pay Jarvis 8.5 and Natchez 6.5, you got more than enough for him to do it. So I don't believe there's any issues with payment. But let me look ahead to next year, where they could have as much as 20, depending on what the cap is. If the cap goes up another $2 million next year, they could have nearly $20 million in cap space, because there's going to be a bunch of entry-level contracts on next year's team, 2 on the blue line, my prediction, probably 2, 3 among forwards. I think you'll have a lot of either rookies or second-year players on the roster, and then just throw in one, league minimum vet. You're going to have about $20 million in cap space when not a lot of teams in the league have cap space. So I think I'm intrigued about even next offseason. Not that I'm trying to rush there, but I think the organization is in pretty good shape regarding that. We'll see how it all plays out. But there's your updates on Kuznetsov and Drury, which are basically factual. What I've been able to kind of glean through conversations about Jarvis, Fost, Natchez, and then the roster for next offseason. Other than that, that's all we got. So I'm Adam Gold. This has been a Kane's Corner Quickie. Who doesn't like a quickie, right? Brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it's for the exterior of your home, find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina on Hamlin Road in Durham. No place like it. We'll check in again as events warrant, or next week, whichever comes first. We will see you next time. Okay?